Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. We have some news that Canada is introducing some more taxes. So we're going to discuss those taxes today. If you are partaking in certain luxury goods, you may be hit with some extra costs. So I'm going to share a little bit about my thoughts about these, what they're saying, what you can expect, and we will dive in. Before we do, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification bell. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends. And if you would like help with relocating abroad, getting residency permits, citizenships, second passports, optimizing your global tax, doing international banking, building Plan Bs, etc., please reach out to us. You can book a call with me, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below where you can send a message through offshorecitizen.net. Now, Canada has come out and they have announced a new round of taxes, and I have mixed feelings about these taxes because I actually, and people will probably find this surprising because they would think that I'm, very against tax in general. I actually am not so against the principle of taxes like these. Okay, so these are consumption taxes. They apply to high-end cars, yachts, and planes, and it is for cars which are over $100,000. I believe jets and cars over $250,000, if I recall correctly. They will be subject to a 10% additional tax, plus could be 20% above the threshold. So could be 10 to 20% extra that you end up paying on it. Now, what they're saying is oh, this is a green tax to, decrease the, carbon emissions, etc. out there. Complete and utter, so I find this completely hypocritical and nonsense. So they're claiming they're going to probably collect an extra $60 million a year from this tax, about $600 million over the course of the next 10 years. The criticism from the aviation industry is this could cost 900 jobs. I kind of find 900 to be a laughably low number when you're worrying about this. They say they didn't consult with the aviation industry, and that's probably true. I mean, it seems like the type of thing where you can get tyranny of the majority. Very few people are affected by private jets and things like this, and so it's easy to push on, which I think is problematic. It's one of the things I really dislike about a lot of people's ideas of democracy. A lot of people seem to have this idea with democracy that it's about majority rules. I think exactly this is completely false. The premise, if you go back to, really the, preeminent establishment of democracy was probably the US, under the Declaration of Independence and American Revolutionary War. They specifically said that they didn't want to, this is the famous line from The Patriot, I don't want to trade one dictator 3,000 miles away for 3,000 dictators a mile away. So the idea is to avoid the tyranny of the majority. And so actually the thing that's supposed to be good about a democratic type system is not rule of the majority, because otherwise you can have the majority abusing the minority, but actually checks and balances on the power of government and simply restricting what it is that they're able to do. So you can't have that kind of abuse. And I think it's deeply concerning that you have no statutory provisions that would prevent them from arbitrarily coming and saying a particular group of people has to suddenly pay 95% tax next year. And realistically, because it's a small portion of the voters, they could get away with it. That's deeply concerning. To me, that's like a really big flaw in the system. So anyway, obviously they've come and imposed this on, it will affect relatively few people, $100,000 plus car. Okay, you're hitting higher end Mercedes at that point. What I find ridiculous about this is there is no real correlation between the price of a vehicle and the consumption of fuel. So if you wanted to argue that it was green, you could do like they have in China. In China, if you import vehicles with over a certain engine size, then there's a bunch of additional taxes associated with it. And I could see kind of an argument for that. But what would that do? That would catch big trucks, SUVs, etc. I mean, the reality is that if you have a GLE 43, it probably doesn't consume any more gas than the equivalent Ford. But you're in a situation where the vehicle costs more, so you're going to tax it more. This is totally incoherent as a green strategy. So why am I kind of okay with these types of taxes? Well, Bill Gates made a comment a number of years ago that I thought was a pretty fair comment, which was that there's a difference between net worth and consumption. And if somebody, is doing good things with their money, then why should they be taxed on that money? Versus if you're in a situation where you're just doing, flagrant consumption, very hedonistic, etc., then, taxing higher seems to have some proportionality of sense. And I tend to believe this. I think that generally I would rather see higher consumption taxes and lower income taxes. I think that's a better way to go. Now in Europe, they've decided to go higher consumption taxes and still high income taxes, although for a while it was lower corporate taxes, and that was how they caused it to balance out. And I specifically think that, listen, I mean, I have various different luxury goods, etc. I don't particularly mind if a person is paying a higher rate of consumption tax on luxury products versus non-luxury products. I think that's somewhat reasonable. It's kind of a way of getting proportionality into the tax system that is completely voluntary, right? You don't have to go and buy this other vehicle. You don't have to fly private. You don't have to whatever. And so if that was kind of the theory, was, all right, let's try and make some proportionality and let's do it based on consumption, which is voluntary, as opposed to based on something like income, which is involuntary, let alone wealth, etc. That seems sensible to me. It seems like actually a somewhat reasonable tax philosophy. If you're going to get the money from somewhere, where are you going to get it? This seems okay. Now, of course, you have other complications around a tax system like this, such as the fact that you're in a situation where if you raise the price of your goods locally, people are just going to buy them elsewhere. Now, it happens to work pretty well for boats, vehicles, and aircrafts because it's hard to work around those particular rules, right? If you have to register it locally, then off you go. Now, particularly, you would want to design these rules such that exports aren't hurt. And so, for example, Bombardier produces some of the top private jets in the world. And so, if they're going to export jets, do they want to be hurt in foreign markets when they're competing with, whoever the competitor is that they're looking at? You probably don't want that, right? So you have to figure out where in the supply chain this gets hit and how you want to make it work. You don't want to have people just flying. It's fairly easy to work around some of these consumption taxes, or it's difficult to enforce them. And that's, I guess, kind of the next point is I feel as though when you're going after a really small slice of tax, the administrative costs are going to be annoying and prohibitively high on the sales side. And at the same time, it's probably not going to be it's going to erode the tax base that you're collecting. So they say, oh, we're going to collect 60 million. Okay, well, what's the administrative cost going to be on the side of the resellers who are actually selling? Because they have to now especially register with CRA, and there's this complication, etc. That's kind of annoying. The last thing that I think is completely asinine, totally ridiculous, like I think they should get challenged in court and shouldn't win on it, is they're saying this will be retroactive to the 1st of January 2022. I think you should never be able to have retroactive taxes. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me whatsoever. So anyway, be that as it may, this is a new tax that's coming in, and I would view this probably as a sign of things to come in other countries. Realistically, you have a narrative which has two pillars. One is green, the other is against the rich. And so I would expect places like New Zealand, Australia, Western, and in particular Northwestern Europe to have policies like this going forward. We will see what actually happens. But yeah, that's what it is. I would love to hear from you guys what you think. Put them in the comments below, and I will look forward to seeing you on the next video.